another player who has some questions long-term, short-term, and that's James Harden. And the amount of times we've seen his name in the media in the past few months is honestly ridiculous. And the saga just continues. Sources all over the media in the past few days have come out with reports adding to the list of potential future homes for James Harden, which now includes Brooklyn, Philly, Milwaukee, Miami, and quote, any other legitimate contender. James Harden coming out basically saying he wants to be anywhere but Houston. He was out partying with little baby, hitting up clubs, instead of attending the first 2 days of the Rockets training camp, and allegedly needs 6 straight negative COVID tests before the league will clear him to practice or play. So he was not in the lineup with the Rockets preseason win over Chicago Bulls yesterday. But this leads me to the $1 million question here, and Sam, we'll start with you. Where is James Harden going to be for the start of the regular season?
I can't answer that right now, Kelly. I'm sorry. I know you want me to give you an answer, but I can't right now. It's just an interesting scenario for me because the Rockets need to move him. I mean, obviously Harden wants to leave, but they're not going to let him go without a fight. And what I mean by that is that Harden is a superstar, and they're not going to give him up for anything. The Rockets are going to want a lot in return. I don't think that's something a lot of teams want to give up. We saw the Nets. I don't think they wanted to give up that. There are other teams who don't want to give that up either. And even I think I saw something saying maybe the 76ers were the lead candidate for Harden right now, along with the other teams mentioned. But the talks between those teams don't seem to be too serious right now. I don't know. I could be wrong, but there doesn't seem to be any serious talk between any teams involved. And that's just kind of confusing for me because everyone he wants to leave. And I think the Rockets want him to leave because, I mean, who wants a player that doesn't want to play for your own team on the roster, even if it's a superstar like James Harden? So that's just interesting for me. And I'm not going to feel bad for the guy because I do understand wanting a trade and wanting to get over the top and win a championship. But it doesn't mean you have to go to little baby's birthday party. It doesn't mean you have to miss training camp. It doesn't mean you have to miss the first preseason game of the year and probably even more because he's got to get those insane number of tests there. I think that is going to hurt his trade value a little bit, to be honest, and his perception because, first of all, teams are going to have to give up a lot to get him, and rightfully so. He's a superstar player. But they're also going to have to deal with the fact that if he doesn't go where he wants to go, he's not going to be very happy. And he wasn't happy in Houston here at the end. It's just a lot. It's a lot going on. Andrew, what do you think?
I think a lot. Kelly, I would answer your question. He's not going anywhere. He's in Houston, and Houston, you do have a problem. It's James Harden. He doesn't want to be there. When you decline to sign an extension that would pay you $50 million over 2 years, you really don't want to be there. But again, as Sam mentioned, what are you going to get for him? We just saw a trade with Drew Holiday going to Milwaukee. I think Milwaukee gave up like 3 first-round picks and a few good players. They gave up George Hill, Eric Bledsoe. They didn't have to give up a star. But that's just for a guy in Drew Holiday who's one of the better players in the league. So when you think about James Harden, you're going to have to give up at least 3 to 4 future first-round picks, another all-star in return. And again, when I look at some of these teams, Brooklyn, I was at the media availability with Sean Marks last month where he specifically said, I am not looking to mortgage my future in order to attain another superstar like James Harden. When you think about Philly, does Tillman Fertitta want to do business with Daryl Morey, who he ran out of town? He's in Philly now. And if I'm Daryl Morey, I'm going to fleece the Rockets for everything they have if they're going to want to do a trade for James Harden. And when I think of Milwaukee, after everything that we've heard between Giannis and Harden, I don't want a guy that doesn't pass the ball on my team. James Harden, how hard is it to play basketball when you're 7 feet and you can dunk as easy as Giannis can? Is that going to work in Milwaukee? I don't think so. Alex's Miami Heat team, does Alex and Pat Riley want James Harden in South Beach with all the stuff and all the entertainment venues you have there at your disposal? I don't think so. And any other legitimate contender, I just think, Kelly, the price is going to be too much. It's a king's ransom, and I don't think any team is going to be held hostage trying to trade for James Harden.
Yeah, to me, that's the glaring issue. I mean, you're hearing all these reports of these teams that supposedly are in conversation with Harden. However, you're not really hearing anything direct from either the teams or Harden and his media staff. It's mostly just rumors. But you look at these teams that they've mentioned that are in, the highest contention, the Heat, Milwaukee, Nets, 76ers, And like you just said, you go through what these teams have to offer, and it's just not realistic. I'd say the Heat or the 76ers are the closest, and Daryl Morey he's been adamant about keeping both Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons together for the time being. And at the same time, the Rockets have been adamant that they're only looking for one of those two stars in return. And then in addition to that, some more, like you said, more first round, second round picks. So these teams aren't going to be willing to give up these players that they've just worked so hard to keep on their rosters over the offseason, or even add to their rosters. And why would you take on a guy you already know is going to bring, like you said, this drama with him? The fact that he didn't show up to the training camp, he's very clearly publicly disrespecting the team that he's been on for so long now, going out to these parties, not trying to even be coy about it. He's literally posting images on Instagram of him at these clubs. Clearly he's not taking his role on the team seriously. Why, as another GM, am I going to take the risk on this guy when I'm not even sure how he's going to react, especially since he's kind of acting like a 3-year-old. He's basically saying, I want, if it's not what I want, I don't want it. And all of us learn in kindergarten, you get what you get and you don't get upset. You can't just choose. If you want the purple crayon and that purple crayon isn't available, that's too bad. And Harden's going to have to deal with that.
That's a great point. Going back to kindergarten, I like it, Kelly. But who I feel bad for in this situation is John Wall. I feel really bad for him. He's coming into such a terrible situation in Houston because I think Harden is going to end up staying with Houston. No one's gonna give the Rockets what they want. And Harden, I mean, he's already, his teams that he wants to go to is kind of a small number, even though at the end of the day it's in the Rockets' hands. But I think he's going to stay, and it's going to be difficult in that locker room to deal with that, because they're a decent team. I mean, John Wall and Boogie looked pretty good last night. I mean, I think maybe not a championship team, but add Harden to that list playing at the top of his game, this team is certainly contending. And that's why I find it interesting that he wants to leave so badly. But I do feel bad for John Wall. I feel bad for just the Rockets as a whole, that whole team having to deal with this guy eventually when he's going to come back, because no one's going to give him what they want and he's going to stay in Houston, I think.
Yeah, if you're head coach Steven Silas, you pay your dues, you put in the time as an assistant, you finally get your shot to be a head coach, you head down to Houston, and then the first thing that happens is that you find out that both of your superstars are disgruntled and they want to leave. They trade Russell Westbrook. He's in DC now. And then you bring back John Wall, as Sam mentioned, and him and Boogie, they look good. I mean, John Wall had 13 points and 9 assists in 19 minutes. Boogie played 15 minutes. He had 14 points, had a few threes. They both look spry and they both look healthy. So again, this is a team that finished, 5th in the West last year. The West is loaded this year. So are they a top 5 team right now? I don't think so, but can they still make the playoffs if Wall and Boogie stay healthy and James Harden kind of accepts Steven Silas's, his game plan and the style he wants to play? Because it's not going to be what Mike D'Antoni has kind of groomed James Harden to be at, being the dominant ball handler and the guy who kind of initiates all offense. You got a guy in John Wall who's a career, 9 assists he's averaged in the league. So he's a guy that can initiate, and he needs to have the ball in his hands too to make others better. And then when you have Boogie in the post, there's not going to be that many touches for James Harden. So will he buy into Steven Silas's plan? Will he buy into that culture, Kelly? I just don't know.
If they can get him to buy in, I think they could be, at least 4th, 5th seed. You added Christian Wood, and you have Wall now, who's just past first point guard on a team loaded with strong perimeter players. And I think Wall and Christian Wood, they could thrive together with pick and rolls. And Wall, you could argue he might not be the best fit with Harden, but he's a great catch and shoot 3-point shooter. Defenses are going to have to respect his shot when the ball isn't in his hands, which is not something that they had to deal with Westbrook when Westbrook was paired with Harden. So, if Harden stays and he's able to buy in, that could be a pretty impressive matchup there, and hard for teams to defend. And for me, Wall comes into the season and he has a chip on his shoulder. He has a lot to prove. We haven't seen him in almost 2 years on an NBA basketball court. Like you said, last night, it is the preseason, and I'm someone who I don't take the preseason too seriously. I take it with, like you said, with a grain of salt.
No one does.
No, but he did look good. He came in his first bucket. Was a drive in the lane, which is what he's known for. He's known for his athleticism. I'm from North Carolina. I remember he played Word of God in a high school basketball tournament, and my dad took me and my brother there. And I remember watching him thinking, oh, he's going to be the next Kyrie Irving. He's a special talent, and hopefully this year he can kind of get this second wave of his talent and give Houston something to hold on to. And you figure maybe if Harden, like you said, if Harden's forced to stay, if him and Wall can make something special, then maybe you have Harden more likely to opt in next season and stay with the Rockets.
Yeah, I mean, he's forced to stay with the team that is still contending and competitive. So really, I mean, like, you can't really ask too much. I mean, he's a superstar. You're paying his checks. Go out and play. I think, I mean, the Rockets certainly, I don't think they're going to get over the top and win the championship. Certainly not. But I do think they are going to contend, and you really can't ask for more. You got John Wall and you got Boogie there. I think Harden, you gotta show up, you gotta test negative, and you gotta go out and play. That's the bottom line, because you're not getting traded, I don't think.
And if Harden wants to have fun, Houston is the most open state in the country right now. If he wants to go to, nightclubs, he's in the right place.
I was gonna say H-Town is absolutely incredible and it's phenomenal. Obviously, it's still open and it's restricted in certain senses, but it doesn't look like James Harden is stopping himself from enjoying himself. He's with Lil Baby, Da Baby. He's with all babies right now in hip hop, Kelly.
No, absolutely. And I think you're right. It's not looking like he's going to end up somewhere. I mean, we still have some time before the trade deadline, so things could change. There's a lot of other players who we're still waiting to hear. Is Giannis going to sign his max extension? Are any other teams going to make some big moves? So there's still a lot of questions. And while we are watching preseason basketball, we still have a little over a week before regular season basketball starts. So there's a lot to look forward to with this season, and like you said when you started the show, it's just exciting to know that we're going to get to watch an actual NBA season.
Yeah, I would just say my final thought on this is for the Houston Rockets, if James Harden continues this detrimental attitude and he continues to act like this, do they kind of get strong-armed into trading him for less and settling for less pieces, settling for less draft picks because they just can't take James Harden's toxic attitude in the locker room? Because a lot of those questions that are going to be asked to the players, coaches, to management, they're going to be more about off the court issues instead of what's happening on the court. So I think for Houston, that's going to be interesting. If they keep hearing all this noise about James Harden wanting to leave, do they just say, you know what, forget this, let's just trade him, whatever we can get, we can get. As of right now, that's not the case, but that will be an interesting development for Tillman Fertitta, Stephen Silas, and the entire Houston Rockets organization.